Hello, guys. Welcome back to the live stream. How's everybody doing? This is Critical African Thinkers, a place where nothing escapes scrutiny. Here we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain that which is factual and logically consistent. So let's talk Afghanistan today. What's happening in Afghanistan? What happened in Afghanistan? How possible was it for the Taliban to just take over even before the US is finally out of Afghanistan? How come after almost more than 2 decades, trillions of dollars spent, and thousands of soldiers killed, and this is still the outcome? What was the game plan going into Afghanistan in the first place? What was the end game? Was it just to show force? Was it to get Osama bin Laden? Was it to cripple the terrorist organization? Was it to build a thriving and stable democracy in the region? What was the goal? And if any of those I just mentioned was the goal, was it really achieved? Well, I think at least Osama bin Laden was got, he was killed, even though he wasn't found in Afghanistan, he was found in Pakistan. So that one is out of it. So what was the reason for the continued presence of, say, the US in Afghanistan for that long? And how come, after all the investment in terms of time, in terms of personnel, in terms of um, resources, in terms of money, financing, and funding, how come in the end this is what happens? So the link is in the description. Just call in. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a chat. I'm expecting Chloe. I'm expecting Bo Diddley. So just come in. Let's talk about this, and how come many of these things are just happening this period. I mean, South Africa happened just a few weeks ago, and now Afghanistan is happening again. What is going on? Is the Biden administration, are they able or they capable of handling these issues? Are they even handling it the correct way? Are they using the correct strategies in terms of the foreign policy as it relates to the Middle East? And yes, Hamas and the Gaza Strip happened as well maybe a few months ago. So what is really going on? Is it possible that a thriving secular government can be in Afghanistan? Or is the Taliban finally going to be accepted as the legitimate government of Afghanistan? And if they are accepted as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, is the US government going to accept them as to endorse them, accept them, recognize them as legitimate government? At least between 1996 and 2001, where the government, only three countries recognized them, just Pakistan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. So now, is anybody going to recognize them? Or are they just going to be a pariah state? Or are they going to be another North Korea that needs to be hemmed in with international pressure, that needs to be hemmed in with sanctions and so many other things? So let's talk. Let's talk about Afghanistan today. Bo, where are you? Let me reach out to Bo. Okay. So waiting for Bo to call in. Now back to the question of whether the Taliban can be recognized as the official government of Pakistan. What what kind of government are they going to institute in Pakistan? Are they going to revert to the authoritarian government that they instituted between 1996 to 2001? And how come, despite all the efforts to cripple them, they are stronger than ever? How come they are stronger now than when the US first um, invaded Afghanistan? What lessons can be learned in terms of dealing with hostile regions or hostile places such as Afghanistan? What lessons can be learned by the US, by other powers, by foreign powers in terms of going into such countries? How sustainable are those uh, are those campaigns? Because if you look at it, it's almost like what happened in Iraq, where as the US was pulling out, the Iraqi army just crumbled and all the weapons fell into the hands of terrorists, and that gave birth to ISIS, and with all the rampage that ISIS caused during that period. And we've seen almost a repeat of it in Afghanistan now. Although the I don't think the Taliban has started. I don't think they're going the route of ISIS in terms of maniacally killing people and all that. But it could just easily get to that point. It could get to that point where they would begin to kill people and begin to suppress people who disagree with them, and then begin to impose a very strict form of Islam. And I think that's already beginning to happen. So what happens to Afghanistan's or the Afghans who have become used to some sort of secular freedom under the US-backed government, now that they have to be under the leadership or the rulership of the Taliban? What are they going to do? Are they going to accept such leadership or rulership, or are they going to revolt? And if they're going to revolt, what's going to happen? Is it going to lead to a civil war? Is it going to lead to more destabilization in the regions, in that region? And also, what happens to the fighters, the foreign fighters in Afghanistan who have been fighting the cause of the Taliban? Now that they are in government, now that they are in power, they might not need to fight so much. What happened to them? Are they going to remain in Afghanistan, or are they going to be shipped off to other places to fight as well? So these are some of the issues that I want us to cover in this live stream tonight. But I'm still waiting for Bo and Chloe to come in so that we can have a discussion. So if you're here, if you'd like to call into the show, the link is in the comment section. Just click on the link and hop on into the show. Just you can say hi. You can say hi. Let me see who is here right now. So now going back to Pakistan, to Afghanistan, do you see the Taliban being able to handle the country? Do you see them being able to run a government successfully? Do you see them able to manage the resources of Afghanistan? Do you see them able to put on the structures or to maintain the structures that the Americans have left for them? I've heard that they are um, they're wanting people from the previous governments to the government that just collapsed to stay back and help them run the country, run the economy. And this brings me to the president of the now ousted president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani. What really happened with him? Why was he not able to hold forth? Why was he not able to stand his ground? Why did his military capitulate so soon, even without putting up any resistance? Were there some saboteurs from within? Did the Taliban somehow infiltrate into the Afghan national armies such that, yeah, Stanley, what are my thoughts? Well, I'm trying to flush out my thoughts here. So why don't you call in and let's talk. Let's just talk about it. Then I can give my thoughts on it and you can give your thoughts as well. So call in, Stanley. I'm waiting on you to call in. I'm waiting on Bo and I'm waiting on Chloe and obviously Kevin. Maybe Kevin will join us later and some other persons that always call into the show. So call in, Stanley. Let's talk and I will give my thoughts. Well, for one, I think that ultimately it's a good thing that the US is leaving Afghanistan because um, they shouldn't have to. Bo, you're listening, yeah, but Colin, let's talk. They shouldn't have to be in Afghanistan forever. They have to exit at a certain point. But where I have issues with is that having spent that number of time in Afghanistan, um, to 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 get all that effort, all that work just get eroded within hours of the US living. It just shows as if it's a wasted investment. It shows as if it's a bad investment. It shows as if they shouldn't have even gone there in the first place because what were the goals going into Afghanistan and how by how much were those goals achieved? By how much were those goals realized? Aside the killing of obviously the killing of Osama bin Laden, what other positives was gotten from this Afghan campaign? What other positives was gotten from this campaign? So I don't want this to be sort of a monologue. I want it to be an interactive session. So Stanley, Colin, Bo, Colin. Hi Stanley, how you doing?
Hey there. I
Yeah,
actually I don't really have much to say about it. Um, and I was in the military actually. I think you know that.
yeah.
Um, I guess you have to rip the band-aid off at some point. Um, I think somewhere a while ago, sometime this week, um, we pretty much should have gotten out of Afghanistan about 18 years ago.
Mm.
Um, it's some weird we have to win thing, and I I don't know if you're gonna be petty. Yeah, we probably should have gotten mad and invaded because the Taliban was harboring Bin Laden. But once we were sure he was out of the country, and he wasn't in the country apparently,
Mhm.
we probably should have started winding down then.
Okay. So you said that at a certain point you have to rip off the band-aid and get out of Afghanistan,
It,
which I think is correct.
and if not now, when? 20 years from now?
Yeah. So if previous administrations could not have done it, I
They
think
could have.
they could have.
I'm firmly convinced that they could have.
So why
Um,
didn't they do it?
well, the same reason Biden did it, and is getting criticism for it. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons kind of seeping out of the well, I said band-aid. It's seeping out of the wound. Um, we've had a lot of people hurt over there and killed Americans. Um,
Are you serious?
I'm sorry.
I mean, are you serious? The Americans have been killed by, were they killed by the Taliban over there? As in during this evacuation process. That's what I'm
Oh
saying.
no,
Not,
no, no, no.
not
I
previously.
meant I'm talking during the war.
Okay,
You
okay.
know, the reason other administrators or administrations didn't do it is, we had blood and treasure
Mm,
put into it. Um, I well, I hope I'm making sense. The reason other administrations didn't do it is we were invested in it.
okay. So,
You don't agree?
as aside, well, I don't know. I don't know. Aside the obvious need to curb terrorism, were there on any other particular interests that the US had in Afghanistan that warranted them to have stayed this long?
Well, are you alluding to rare earth minerals? Because I
I'm not
actually,
alluding to anything.
I'm sorry.
I said I'm not alluding to anything. I'm just trying to, see
Um,
if there are other motivations.
other than I'm stretching, obviously, I don't think once we knew bin Laden wasn't there, and especially, I mean, we found him in Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
That should have been the end of the war right then. We
Mm,
shouldn't have gone much past. And I understand we made promises, women were getting rights and all that stuff. And it's so complicated. I'll never be right in my opinion. But I think once bin Laden was dealt with, um, I really think we should have just kind of bowed out, or at least started to bow out then. The whole reason we went there is because Al Qaeda was there, right? And
mhm.
um, we got bin Laden. So I see Bo has joined, and you know,
Yeah.
it's so complicated, but I really think we should have been out of there way before now. And um, I think Biden, could he have done it better? Yes. Could we have planned it better? Yes. However, we got to get out at some point. And pretty much the war's not popular with anyone in America.
True. So, Bo, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing?
What's going on with you, bro?
I'm
All
good. It's
right.
been a while, brother. How you? I've missed you here. Where have you been?
Yeah, I missed the last few episodes. It's ducking and dodging, man, ripping and running. Not
Okay, I hope you're good.
in tune with what's going on.
Okay,
I
but I hope
wanted to catch
you're
the
good.
episode with the sister Sheena. I missed that one. That
Oh,
was one I regret missing.
uh,
Had to
she's
catch it on the
she's
playback.
yeah. We are going to have another. I'm going to have another chat with her in our channel pretty soon. So I hope you don't miss that one.
All right. Well, yeah, with the whole Afghanistan thing, though, I think we just got caught up with the politi- politicization of a lot of these issues because initially I think the policy under the first administration that initiated was pretty much just to go in there after bin Laden and pretty much, man, just bomb it and get out of there, and keep it moving, but
Mm,
then because of politics and everything, we got caught up in the whole humanitarian aspect of having to stabilize it and then instill this next government, ensure women have rights and all this other irrelevant stuff to us, to the average American citizen. And we got stuck in that place. And then, due to effective leadership now, you know what happened. You seen the Taliban take over, and we weren't even able to execute our exit plan like we should have.
mm.
And then they got to take over what we left behind or whatever and got ran out of there. So,
So do you do you think this relates to America's kind of desire to be the savior of the world? Like, I mean, the kind of desire to want to fix things everywhere.
I don't believe that that was the initial agenda coming into the Bush administration with the Bush administration. I believe the subsequent administration with Obama turned it into somewhat of a humanitarian type of thing,
Mm,
a humanitarian type effort. Whereas I think the original Bush administration was just to go in there, bomb them, get Afghanistan, and whatever comes of it, it's on them.
mm.
But then they politicized it, and then yeah, turned it into somewhat more humanitarian and trying to ensure the next government that came into place and women had certain rights and everything that comes with that. But yeah, I believe at the end of the day though, that's a failed ideology when it comes to America trying to export certain values to the other places. Not that I don't
Yeah,
believe, not that it's not values that I personally value, but I don't believe that there's value that is worth trying to export.
true, true. And it seems to me that whichever route the American government had taken, they would have gotten flack for it. I mean, if we look at the case
Exactly.
of Libya, you look at the case of Libya, they went in, got rid of Gaddafi, and they went out, and people were still complaining that you just did this and you did not put any structures in place to at least stabilize the region, stabilize the country, and the country delved into civil war and all that. Now, in this case, they've stayed for 20 plus years, and they're living now, and it's crumbling. So it wasn't going to be at any point. It wasn't going to be any win for the Americans somewhat. So I think that Biden did the right thing pulling out at this point in time. You
No,
couldn't.
no, because Biden didn't pull out and he didn't ensure a exit because the Taliban got like over 100 something Black Hawks down, and American troops weren't able to pull out. So it wasn't as though he structured it or he anticipated this happening. He got caught with his pants down, and the Taliban, took over.
Mm,
And the the administration that was in place over there allowed them to kind of like just march in and catch America with their pants down, so to speak, and take over all the hardware. You know what I mean? If Biden
Mm,
did anticipate this, then he's a failure.
mm.
Allowing the
So,
Taliban to just come in and take all of our hardware and U.S.
so those
equipment and whatnot.
those hardware, were they supposed to go back to the US, or were they left for the Afghan army?
Of course, they were supposed to come back if the army wasn't able to maintain it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not gonna leave our equipment in the hands of a Taliban-led government. Russia and China supported regime. So
So,
yeah,
but
this was a
but
catastrophic failure.
have there been fighting between US forces and the Taliban forces as they are trying to take over the country, take over the capital? Have there been any fighting between both forces?
I don't believe it was.
Hey, Bo. Hey, Bo.
Yeah, I hear you.
Um, were you ever in the military?
No.
Okay. Um, the military, if they left equipment, of course, it could probably be reverse engineered, but the military generally doesn't leave stuff behind if they think it can be used against them. Um, my guess is at least some of it was probably disabled. And again, stuff can be reverse engineered. Um, I don't think the military left stuff if they thought it was necessary to bring it back. Or do you disagree?
Yeah, I personally disagree. I haven't heard anything that suggests that the equipment that was left over was disabled or they had any foresight
Well,
into disabling
the
it.
military is not going to publicly say, "Hey, we've left a bunch of disabled stuff."
Well, then that may be the case.
I'm again, I was never in Afghanistan, but if we do anything right, and sometimes that's a stretch, you're not going to leave equipment for the enemy
So,
unless it's disabled.
can you give an example of a perfectly executed US exit strategy in all the campaigns that the US have engaged in?
You're asking me?
Yes, you, Stanley. You're the military man.
We have never. Um, you mean since Vietnam or including Vietnam? Never.
Including Vietnam.
I'm sorry.
Said including Vietnam.
Including Vietnam, we have not left a country other than, you could do skirmishes like Grenada, maybe. I don't know that there was much fallout, but like major newsworthy, like forever wars,
Mm.
we have not done it right since, well, actually Korea too. We haven't done an exit strategy well since World War II.
So
At least
this just seems to be like a pattern that keeps repeating itself. I mean,
and Bo might agree with me. It's hubris. We think we can do nation building, and I think that's a huge mistake.
mm,
I
I'm
we
coming
have what nation have we built successfully? None.
true because
And
I
and if I wanna really be persnickety about it, we haven't built our nation right.
mm,
But I'm going off topic there.
Well, I I think it should be sort of a teaching moment for America to just realize that not every
Yes.
battle is a battle that you have to fight. I mean, at times you just have to
Yes.
let people figure out their shit themselves, and if
Now,
they
I,
can't,
I
go.
agree with going into Afghanistan to extract bin Laden.
Yeah, yeah.
I can
I
agree
think I
with
agree with
that.
that too. I agree with that too.
But once we should have, especially like I said, once we got
Mhm.
um, bin Laden, we should have been gone. And if you want to go back before Iraq, pure
Mhm.
mistake. We
Okay,
we
now,
should have never gone there.
do you think this has anything to do with military? I mean, people who are profiting off this war, maybe lobbyists or politicians who have
Yeah,
financial
me.
stakes in it.
Yeah, the neocons. Yeah, of
I
course.
you know what? I would defer to Bo. I don't want to think that. But that cynical view, I don't think it's I think it is possible.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even see it as being cynical or being even far fetched. To me, it seems the common sense. That there's a political elite within our country. That invested in heavily in the military industrial complex. You know what I mean? That promote
Mm.
these type of wars and yeah.
I see a similar parallel with my country because somehow there are certain people who are invested in chaos in the country, and somehow they are profiting off it. Maybe because of increased budgetary allocations to the military in terms of executing the war against terrorism and all that. So somehow they would just find a way to sponsor things to make the mess things up just so that they can profit off it. Gambling with the lives of people, uh, using people as chess in a game that can readily spiral out of control and become a very big mess and a big um, problem for everyone. So I don't know. I don't know how such thing can be curbed where politics is not mixed with the military affairs. I mean,
Well, if you
politics is
look
not
at the
part of the
lobby,
military
if you
affairs.
look at the lobbying groups in America, and who's spending all the money, those big corporations like Halliburton and the other military producers that produce the tanks and all that. It's a billions of dollars are spent in lobbying groups, to to keep a lot of these wars and different things going. You know what I mean? No matter what goes on in this country, military spending never goes down, whether we're in war or in peace. you know, billions and
Mm.
upon outrageous billions of dollars are allocated toward the military industrial complex. And there's certain politicians that's elected simply to further the interests of those neocons. You know what I mean?
So basically, it's a business, and they're trying to create markets for their business and sustain their business and even grow the business, just like
Right.
any other conventional industry would do.
Exactly.
That's just sad. That's just sad. So they're gambling with the lives of people, and it's not right.
The
But do you think
military is
that
big business in America. Military spending.
do you think that the Taliban would be able to effectively govern Afghanistan?
Um, I don't think they. Well, my definition of effective and the Taliban's definition of effective may be different.
Mm.
So, I don't really see them doing much in terms of like productive in terms of nation building, but instilling some form of Sharia and taking it back to some type of primitive type governance that they prefer over there that's more suiting to them. You know, maybe, yeah, I believe they could be successful. I see that they
So
have the back end of Russia and China now, so yes, I believe that they'll be able to accomplish whatever it is they set out to accomplish, and I don't believe that America is gonna pretty much put forth any effort into trying to stop whatever they have going on now.
so why do these totalitarian governments they always find it easy to cozy up with China, and China seems to not mind interacting with anybody as long as the economics is good for them.
The geopolitics, being able to take a position opposite America to exert some type of influence. I think it's as simple as that for them. I don't think they care either way, but just being able to find another stronghold where they can exert some type of influence in the world, especially in
Mm,
opposition of America, is a win for them.
that makes sense because if the Taliban becomes a government that opposes U.S. ideology in the Middle in Southeast Asia, and China is aligned with them, it puts them a stronger footing internationally, and you can see China building all these kinds of alliances all around. And there was one video I saw about how China's imperialistic um, campaign is not making the mistakes that the US made in terms of empire building, in the sense that they're not trying to foster any ideology, they're not trying to impose any ideology on the people. They go more with economics. They go more with, okay, we're going to give you these loans, we're going to give you this infrastructure and all that. All right,
Right.
Anan. Hey, Anan, welcome to the conversation. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good.
Yeah, so jump right in.
Well, I joined just now, but I will say this. The military industrial complex detests these conflicts because the Afghan security forces use very inexpensive low tech equipment. No one benefits from them purchasing them.
So no one
The
is
military
benefiting
industrial
from
complex wants
this.
high end equipment to fight big wars with big enemies, like
The
fighter
Taliban
aircraft
is
and all that.
the Taliban is not a big it's not a big war, it's not a big enemy.
No, so for example, rifles, mortar shells, D-30 artillery. This is all low-tech stuff, very cheap. And most of it isn't manufactured in the US anyway. It's manufactured in places like Russia. Um, so why would anyone want to that's why the military industrial complex has opposed these wars from the start. They prefer big conflicts with things like China or the Pakistanis or stuff. They want fighter aircraft, tanks, not low-tech, inexpensive stuff.
But it's going to be difficult to get that kind of war except you want to go into a major war. And I don't think we've had that type of war in
Well,
decades when they use those type of instruments you're talking about.
well, wait. Um, Prove that. Are you saying that the American military wants a big war?
I'm saying those who support military industrial complex, they want high-end equipment. They don't want for example, the Afghan forces could have held out if they got low-tech equipment. But who wants that? Because that
But
doesn't benefit anyone when they get low-tech equipment.
but
When they
that's
get things like go ahead.
but that's assuming that we're talking about America wanting to arm the Afghans or arming the
Right.
Taliban. But I don't believe that when I use the industrial military industrial complex, I'm not looking at it from that perspective. Like I'm just looking at the money that's generated behind wars and that's spent in the billions of dollars
Yeah,
just over there, and there being a political elite that supports that occupation in any type of excursions into that whole area, because
right.
For
regardless of the weapons you see the Taliban using,
right.
there's billions of dollars that's being
Yes.
circulated in an economy that's supported by that war taking place. So maybe
So
if we
I
look at
think
the
what you're referring
trillions
to
of
is
dollars
the
that's been
yeah,
spent, I think it's been estimated that over $1 trillion has been spent
yeah.
in
That's in the
Afghanistan
past.
by America. Like
That's in
that's
the past. But right now, I think what you're referring to is the 10,000 contractors that were withdrawn. And what they did is they maintained the equipment of the Afghan security forces. They maintained their air force and so forth. And when they were withdrawn, then everything collapsed because they had no ability to maintain their equipment.
Okay,
right.
but your statement is now, well, I'm not sure that anyone, even the contractors, even the industrial complex wants a huge war. And if America really wanted a huge conflict, there would still be a draft.
No, not like that. So what you're referring to, so the traditionally since 9/11, the military has been very opposed to these conflicts because it got in their way.
Yeah, because
They
people
wanted
die.
to modernize the military and things like that. They weren't interested in this kind of stuff, low tech coin. This is actually FID, Foreign Internal Defense, providing assistance to another country that's fighting a war. That is not of interest to people. This
Okay,
is not.
but
So Americans
what do
haven't
you
haven't
term
fought
as a
in.
major conflict, man?
So for them, I think it is big power conflict. It's not actual fighting. It's just having equipment to be able to confront the Chinese, the Russians, other large powers. It's not actual fighting.
Okay,
And
then
the kinds of
what is your
advanced capabilities for that
definition?
radar technology.
What is your definition of a major conflict?
Well, what I'm
Having
referring to, you're referring to military industrial complex. That's I'm referring to what they want. They want
right, and
advanced
the last
equipment.
I checked, that involved wars, major conflicts, and that pretty much involves people dying. What it seems you're saying is major conflict is done online.
No, so for example, you're referring now to the war in Afghanistan. In the war in Afghanistan, Americans haven't been in a combat role since 2011 for 10 years.
I'm
What you're talking
asking
about,
I'm
yeah.
asking what a major conflict is.
So what they want to do is prepare for major conflict, not actually fight one. So the last major, well, the 2003 would have been a major conflict because they had to take down the Iraqi air defense system. 2011 was a major conflict because they had to take down the Libyan air defense system.
That
Right? They're saying
Iraq was not a major conflict.
initially the first few weeks when they had to take down the air grid and all of that, and when they had
It
to
was
take
not
down the
a major
villages.
conflict. And I was in the first Gulf War. No, Iraq was not a major conflict. I mean,
Yes, I would agree.
you could make
I
the
would agree.
argument that the aftermath was a
Exactly.
major conflict, but even then, that wasn't a major conflict. I mean, even insurgency, the aftermath of the main conflict in Iraq was not World War II. And
Agreed. Agreed. So
maybe I should
we're
define
agreed.
myself. World War II was a major conflict. Vietnam was not. Iraq was not. Afghanistan was not. The Civil War was, but I mean, Iraq. When you say major
Okay.
conflict,
Maybe medium conflict. Medium conflict. Then we'll use that word. But
Okay,
for
not
example, after the first few weeks in Iraq, there was no medium conflict. It was low tech, which people didn't want to fight because they said, why should we fight for a bunch of Iraqis? Let them fight. Let them die. So people didn't want to fight. in an insurgency. And people didn't want to help the Iraqis fight because I think people were suspicious of them. But whatever the case may be, the Iraqis were able to win their war. And so now they exist as an independent state. But the thing is that, well, they don't have a very powerful, well, they were able to win and they have their own revenues and so on. The problem in Afghanistan is that they were at war with Pakistan and they never had a chance without a lot of international support.
I can see your point, and I'm being one-sided. From an American perspective, it wasn't a major conflict. For the people there, of course, it was huge. And if you're, I think I see where you're going with this. If you're arguing that America should be smarter.
No, I'm not arguing that. So you're referring to military-industrial complex. They don't want to purchase rifles and mortars. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested in high-tech equipment because that's where the
Okay,
money
so
comes
so Anand, let me try and see if I understand the point you're trying to put across. So what you're saying is that the military-industrial complex, they are interested in posturing that will lead to the purchase of high-end equipment like helicopters
Yes,
and all that stuff. Not necessarily that you have to use it for war, but just um, the threat
yes.
of violence itself should be able to stimulate countries to purchase those weapons as a deterrent to other countries. So they
Right. And
might.
it's not just in the US, but for example, if other countries buy fighter aircraft, that's also good. But fighter aircraft is not used in these low-tech wars. Right now,
So if,
coin aircraft are used, like the A-29 attack aircraft, which is uh, which is turboprop. But that is very inexpensive. People, the military-industrial complex, it detests that, and they don't want militaries purchasing that stuff. And of course, the U.S. is not the manufacturer of it.
but don't you think that these little conflicts are sort of proxy wars that
Yeah.
somehow would tie to the bigger wars that the military-industrial complex would benefit from?
Well,
Actually, it doesn't.
essentially,
It
they're
doesn't. That's
wars
why the
that
military doesn't want to
America
fight
and
them.
Russia and China don't want to fight.
Yeah.
Well, so
So
let me put it this way: these conflicts are so the way they see it is why should American money be going in this direction? Also, you have to keep in mind that America hasn't had a combat casualty in Afghanistan for 2 years, right? So the U.S. is not involved in action, and people were like, why bother helping them go fight the
no,
Pakistanis?
it's not a
What's the
function of the
point?
sentiment. See, it's not a function of the sentiment of the soldiers now. We're talking about the sentiment of those who want to sponsor wars, the politicians, the bureaucrats, those who are not
Exactly.
in the military, those who are in Washington or somewhere else, who are just moving pieces to make sure that conflicts arise in certain areas so they can sell their hardware or sell their equipment.
No,
Those
I
are the
got that.
people
But
we're
what I'm
talking
trying to say
about.
is the Afghan national security forces don't buy advanced hardware. They buy very low tech stuff. So no one industrial complex wants them. I mean, you could say maybe that the Brazilian company that sells them A-29s, but they sell so few. And by the way, they just sold a bunch to Nigeria to help to fight Boko Haram, Daesh. But
So now,
but in
if
general, it's so small even for Embraer, which is a Brazilian
if
company that sells which sells turboprop aircraft. But that's like the highest tech item the Afghans have. There's nothing else they have that anyone really benefits from producing in the industrial complex.
if there's a country that is close to Afghanistan and they feel that Afghanistan is going to become a threat to them, so therefore they need to prepare themselves against any possible aggression from Afghanistan.
No,
So therefore they need to purchase equipment like the aircraft and all
no.
those stuff you're talking about. Don't you see that
Hey,
that as a
Charles,
possibility?
can you say
Yeah.
that again? Who would Afghanistan threaten?
No, I'm just giving an hypothetical
Oh,
situation.
I'm sorry.
Susan, let me
Okay.
let me just put it to you this way, Charles. The way they see it is that the Taliban is a wing of the Pakistani army. So let the Pakistanis rule Afghanistan. Let them wear themselves out for decades ruling the place. Why should we care? I think Biden, I don't know if he himself, but other people in it said, let's bet on the stronger horse. Let's bet on the Pakistani army. Let's make a deal with Al Qaeda, with the Taliban. with these other terrorist groups and see if that works out. And so we'll see if they will actually honor their word. Will Al Qaeda stop doing terrorist attacks against countries around the world? We'll see, because that's basically who Biden made a deal with.
So basically, what you're saying is that Afghanistan
Prove
was
that.
traded off
Prove that.
to the terrorists as a payoff for them to stop terrorizing the world.
No.
Yes, and other stuff. So, for example, they'll get foreign aid from other countries, presumably, if they follow the terms of this agreement. So there was a peace agreement signed directly between the U.S. and the Taliban, which is basically a peace deal between the U.S. and the Pakistani army and Al Qaeda and all these other terrorist groups. And so that was signed by Trump, but it was really implemented by Biden.
Really?
Yes,
So
but
my
there is
rip off the
conditionality.
Band-Aid theory is wrong, huh?
Well, it's based on conditionality that they follow the terms of their agreement. But I think that so the part of the deal was that they would not attack the Afghan government, but they did, and they killed something like over 15,000 soldiers in a matter of 4 months, right? So they clearly violated the terms of the agreement. I think Trump would not have followed through under those terms, but Biden was okay with it for some reason.
Yeah, I think I saw an interview of Trump today on I think Sean Hannity, where he was saying that he had a chat with the Taliban leader and the leadership of the Taliban, and he gave them his conditions that this and this and this, that if they had broken the part of the agreement, that it was going to rain down so much hell on them and all that. So it seemed as if Trump would have been a much more deterrent to the
That's correct.
Taliban.
In fact, the Taliban would not have attacked the Afghan forces as part of if Trump had been in power. The Pakistani army wouldn't have, because the Pakistani army basically sent 20,000 troops as advisors to lead this attack. They wouldn't have. They spent billions of dollars on it. They wouldn't have done it if Trump was in power, I think. Or if they did, then Trump would have, not just Trump, but the whole world would have reneged on it. And all the Afghans really needed was a few strategic airstrikes, and they could have killed 50,000 of these Taliban because they're out in the open.
But they
So
stopped the airstrikes though. Biden stopped the airstrikes that was holding back the Taliban.
right, so that he did that at the beginning of this year. He stopped all the airstrikes,
Right.
and
And
then
that's how
he
they were able
initiated less
to
than 50
advance
a day for a
upon
week. Huh?
Kabul. And that's how they were able to advance on Kabul. Kabul.
Well,
Kabul, however you
eventually, but
pronounce
first, what they did is they were killing about 3,000 ANDSF a month from May, June, July, taking cities, and well, inflicting catastrophic losses on them in battle after battle after battle. And Trump, well, not Trump, Biden was okay with that. So
But what I'm
it's
saying is, my point is, Biden called off the airstrikes that was keeping the Taliban at bay away from the capital. And
yes,
they even predicted and told him what discontinuing those airstrikes would mean. So
yes.
them advancing on the taking over the capital, like this was a direct result from decisions made by the
Yeah, but I think even
to,
bigger than that
to
was
cancel
so what Trump
airstrike.
did. So what Trump did is the U.S. had 2,500 troops in country, and there were another 9,000 from other countries, coalition, and then there was another 10,000 contractors who maintained equipment for the Afghan National Security Forces. Um, Biden announced all of them had to be withdrawn immediately, including the 10,000 contractors. He could have issued a contract to let the Afghan Ministry of Defense hire the contractors directly, but Biden didn't want that. He wanted all of them out immediately.
But that's
And
not.
then he well that was okay. What else did he do? So that's what led to the general collapse, because the sense was that Biden had now bet on the Pakistani army, and now he was going to that was his militia. Now the Taliban is his militia. Are you there?
Yeah, yeah.
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 So if I understand this very well, Biden wanted to get out of that place, and he didn't care what consequences would follow his decisions of pulling out everybody
Well,
from
it was not just he
Afghanistan.
wanted out. See, the thing is, it was fine to withdraw U.S. troops. He wanted all the contractors out, all the international contractors out, and he wanted the coalition out.
So what was the motivations behind this? Is it that he wanted to be the president to have ended the Afghanistan war, the longest war in US history? Did he want that as part of his laurels and his medals, or was there something much more strategic to his withdrawal?
Stanley, what do you think?
About
What was Biden's motivation to just suddenly pull the plug on everything in a way that everyone thought that Biden was against the
I mean,
Afghan security forces?
I I think, to keep going back to a dumb metaphor, um, I don't know that I really agree. Um, yes, Trump did something that I don't agree with. I will agree that it was Biden's decision, and you can't hide behind, hey, the motion was already, in progress. Um, I think I Biden never agreed um, with how Afghanistan was conducted, even when he was vice president.
Well, yes, but there's a difference. There's his agreement to pull all U.S. troops is not in question. The point is that on May 1st, the Taliban launched a massive offensive and killed perhaps 3,000 in that month. So it's after that offensive was launched in violation of the agreement. Biden
You know what?
didn't reauthorize airstrikes.
Charles is not going to like this. Um, I I think the band-aid needed to be ripped off. And I think, and I could go back and probably in the last day or two see stories, let them kill each other. And it's kind of an old racist trope, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's time for us to go out. I really think that they'll kill each other is the logic.
So,
Hopefully
Bo, what do
that's
you
not
think?
too controversial.
Uh, I don't know. I think it's all on how you see it. I guess I'm not a fan of Biden and his administration, and I seen it as a failure. And I see it as a failure how the way in which they executed their exit strategy and allowed the Taliban to take over. And Stanley brought up the fact that maybe a lot of that equipment or whatnot is defunct and was disabled. If that was the case, then that may change my opinion on what's going on.
Well,
But
they they can
all in
they can
all, I feel
reverse
like it was
engineer it.
all in all, I feel like it was pretty much a failure how they handled the situation or allowed the situation to play out.
Right.
So, what do you
So
think they could
Stanley,
have done
I have
better?
another question for you, if I might. So the question is, the when in 2001 there were no Afghan women in universities, and there were 1,000 men and boys in universities. Today, there's over 100,000 women
You
and girls in universities, over 100,000 men and boys in universities, and girls do better than boys academically. So it's a totally different country. Um,
man,
do
you
you
you are
do you think the woke people will, because there are right now demonstrations and protests taking place across Afghanistan where the Taliban are shooting into crowds, but non-violent
damn it.
protests. There are also protests happening globally. Do you think the woke will support them? I mean, not militarily, but
You
at least
you
by a hashtag.
man, you're gonna kill me, aren't you? um, I think. Well, I'm gonna answer the question. Then I have a question for you. Um, I do not think that the woke people. I can almost guarantee you in 6 months, Afghanistan will not be on the front pages I don't, and I can't confess that, the Taliban's smart, but if they were smart, they're gonna rule their country the way they want to govern and not bother anyone else. Maybe they learned their lesson. I could be wrong and probably am. Um, I think that the woke will forget them. They will
Yeah, I
find it.
think so too.
They will find another fight because woke isn't totally bad, but to me, being woke, and I really don't want to go here, but I'm gonna. Woke is white supremacy. They will
I don't
find,
believe that people's response to this has anything to do with woke or not at this point. I think everybody, as it relates to American citizens, are pretty much burnt out on the whole predicament in Afghanistan. So regardless
and
of
the
women,
woke are part of the burnout.
the woke, well, I guess you can say that the woke are part of the burnout and
Well, no,
have no
they're as
interest
burned
on.
out as anyone
I don't.
else.
Okay, sir. All right.
And the question was, will the woke support Afghanistan? And my answer is no. They're burned
I'm
out
not
too.
talking about sending money. I'm just talking about
No,
there are millions of people in Twitter campaigns. Support those.
right. I think the woke will move on to another cause, as woke people will do, because um, I think it's the woke are it's a pretense. They're not really woke. Maybe that's my whole point.
Yeah, and there's another point too that is important to remember. Afghanistan was never this conservative. The Islam in Afghanistan hasn't been this conservative for centuries. So the Taliban
Really.
is a massive break, something that they have never seen before in their history. So they've traditionally had women who played an important role for centuries. So this is a
Mhm.
massive shock to this. It's an external invasion, basically by external forces to take them out and to rule them.
W- now I'm going to ask you questions other than the question I was going to ask. Well, tell us more about the history, because I kind of got the impression that way back when I first heard about Afghanistan was what, in the 80s when the Russians were there.
Yeah,
And I also know about how the U.S. supported the Mujahideen, etc. But I was always of the impression, and obviously you can teach me. I always thought it was kind of that way. Women, had to have their place, etc. So you're telling me that that's wrong?
that's wrong. Until 1973, it was actually similar to South Korea.
Hmm.
And then the Soviets did their thing. I'm not defending what the Soviets did. And then the
Right,
Pakistanis did their thing, and they both fought a war over it. And then, see, the thing is, Islam in general wasn't this extremist until 1919.
right, right.
Overall, worldwide, there's been a massive increase in extremism, which, if you go back like 50 years ago or 100, no one would have believed this was possible.
Because I mean, if you go all the way back to, I, I think you're right, but I guess I better go and read up on Afghan history because I know, um, as a matter of fact, women way back in the day, back to Saudi Arabia, women played a huge part in Islam.
Yes. So I'm not just saying that they're woke and 53 genders. It's nothing. I'm not making that
No.
case, but a lot more liberal than this.
So when did Afghanistan, when did they become, do you have an idea of when, this weird form of,
So this happened in the 80s. So this happened after 73. The Soviets got rid of their king, and then all hell broke loose. And then over time, the Pakistanis radicalized the country, and they supported all this extremist, and they brainwashed the young, and they made the country extremist. And of course, they trained over 500,000 non-Afghans to go fight in Afghanistan. And
well,
it's
So you're saying Pakistan was that extreme?
Yes.
How did Benazir Bhutto get elected?
So Pakistan itself was a liberal Muslim country until 1947. It also
Yeah,
became
right.
very extreme.
Huh.
So, like, for example, it's unthinkable now, but if you see pictures in 47, you wouldn't recognize the place. I mean, they were like Muslims in India.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to go back and read some history because I mean I understand what happened in 47. Um, that's when the India Pakistan split happened, right?
Yes. But I think the bigger thing that happened was 1919, when what we call Wahhabism took over, when they
Ah,
took over Saudi Arabia, and that spread extremism all over the world. And there's not been a counter to that. And you see it in places, even in well, you see it in London, but forget about London. Indian Muslims are a lot more liberal than UK Muslims. But even in India, there are places where 2 decades ago all the women dressed like Muslim women, dressed like non-Muslim women, and today all of them are dressed in tents. And it's because someone has threatened them with violence, so they don't really have a choice.
wow.
I think it's like that in some parts of the UK too. There are places where all the women are dressed up. I don't think it's by choice. If everyone is, it's there's a threat of violence behind it, which and they know the police won't protect them.
Well, they can't. I mean, the police don't understand.
So I'll
Yeah,
give you I'll send you something offline. Maybe he'll connect.
okay.
It's an article about this, but in the UK, every year, UK Muslim girls and women file over 5,000 petitions a year for for honor violence. This is a subset of
Right,
violence,
right.
and only 2.5% of cases is any action taken against the perpetrator. The police basically don't want to get involved, and they accuse them of white supremacy and Islamophobia, and just don't want and this is among, they know they're not going to get action. These are the ones who bravely step forward anyway.
How
So
about
if they knew
France?
action was taken, there would be far more.
Are there similar statistics in France?
I don't have them.
Okay,
But I know that France doesn't collect detailed data like this because they
right.
believe in a raceless society, so they don't have it. But I think it's better in France than the UK. The UK is the worst place because the UK, basically the non-Muslims have abandoned the Muslims and have allowed the liberal Muslims to get attacked. And in fact, a lot of the homicides in the UK is actually liberal Muslims being killed by Islamists, which is just being called violent crime,
So
and
why
they've let it happen.
so why don't we know this in the US? I mean,
Well, the
you
US
know.
is much better. The US is much
Well, no,
better.
no, no. What I mean is, if what you're saying is that sort of thing is endemic in England, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been like, I won't say the top of the headlines, but I would imagine, that those kind of numbers would be a big deal in the
So
US.
you can, it is covered by some people. Majid Nawaz, the Muslim press covers it.
Right.
You
Hmm.
can read what Quilliam wrote up about this. You can read what Majid Nawaz wrote up about this, but it's not covered by non-Muslims. It's only talked about by Muslims. So in the
Okay.
Muslim press, if I don't know if that makes sense to you, because the
No, I want
non-Muslim woke basically hate liberal Muslims and think they're all white supremacists or some kind of.
I need to you before you go, we I need to give you my email address because this is fascinating.
I have your email address, I think.
Okay. Man, that's huge. But I wanna I think we've kind of gone off on a tangent. Um so sorry, Charles, I kind of
So
No, no
this is an
problem. I
interesting
think
point.
it's
I
still on
think this
point.
is what Stanley. This is not a tangent, because there's a lot of Afghans who, when they visit London and the UK, feel unsafe. They used to feel safer in
why
Kabul,
unsafe?
huh?
Why unsafe?
Because liberal Muslims can get can are subject to violence in the UK. So there's this perception. So there's in fact a lot
Well,
of Muslims who live in
how
Cairo
how
who are
do
afraid
they
to
know
visit
you're
London.
liberal or not? Because you're not wearing a hijab?
No, I'm saying if someone knows you by name because they track you. If you like write a blog or something, or if you write articles, or if you're a public figure, or if you're an open imam, the people keep careful tabs of everybody. They have lists.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yes, it's very dangerous to be liberal Muslim in many countries, in the UK especially, but around the world it's very dangerous. That's why liberal Muslims tend to be quiet and not they talk anonymously because they're afraid of getting killed.
Well, why is Britain? I would. Is Britain really that liberal? I've never been. So,
What do you mean by liberal?
well, I mean, for better or for worse, America puts like billions of people, not billions, but it's hyperbolic. But I mean, America won't hesitate to put your butt in jail. How is
I
how
think wokeness has done it because the woke generally support Islamists against liberal Muslims. This is not recent. This is going back. This has been
no,
going
they
back
don't.
decades. Huh?
The woke
Yes.
support. Okay, well, you have a bunch to teach me.
Well, I mean, it's similar to what you see in the black community. It's gotten better, but right after Floyd, you saw people trying to fire John McWhorter, a bunch of Caucasians saying that he was a white supremacist. Ultimately, of course,
Well,
the black community was able to rally around him and put a stop to that. But that's like a hint of
who
what it's like.
rallied around McWhorter?
I think a lot of people rallied around him. But initially, after he did say there's a considerable chance I will be fired.
Bullshit. McWhorter would never be fired. He's got. I won't say McWhorter believes what he believes, and I'm a fan of McWhorter, but I just don't agree with him. Same with Lowry.
Yeah,
I
I think they would both tell you that things have improved a lot because the black
Well, of
community has
course
more or less
they would.
rallied, right?
We're not being lynched every time we look at a white woman, but there are things that haven't changed. But anyway, that's a tangent. But wow, you've opened up a new thing for me to study because I never thought Britain was that open or
I
that.
think it's the woke who have done this. I mean, in part, but it's not just them. I think this is
But
old,
define
maybe lack of
woke.
understanding. Hmm?
Define woke.
So the woke
Give me
people
an
will
example.
generally support they support a series of positions around the world. They tend to support conservative Muslims against liberal ones. They tend to support it's very they try to support like the small minority of blacks who have extremist positions against the majority, which like you have much more reasonable positions, right? They tend to do a bunch of other crap like that.
But you're talking back in the 60s, what's his name? Um, I cannot remember this author's name, but the one who wrote Mau Mauing the uh what is his name? Yeah, back in the 60s there were, you know, everyone wanted to be, a Black Panther. Um, but I mean, I think today's woke are people maybe over polite, but I think wokeism is just, you know, being defined as woke. One man's woke is another man's polite.
Okay, so they believe in a certain set of assumptions about the universe. So I think John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry have discussed this. There was an article on Substack that they reference. I've sent Charles. You remember the name of the person who wrote it? It basically they were there was someone from the woke who critiqued them and said that you people like them and Thomas Sowell believe in the concept of free will and empowerment and that people are intrinsically potentially powerful potentially intrinsically intelligent, and they disagree. The woke disagree with that. They believe people don't have those things, and therefore freedom of action, freedom of thought, and freedom of speech are tools for the powerful to hurt the less powerful.
Not the smart woke people. And you can be woke and smart, or you can be smart and not woke. I think woke is a myth, and I think it's more kind of like CRT. This whole thing is blown out of proportion. Um, I wouldn't consider myself woke necessarily. However, I have huge problems with McWhorter and Lowry. They're just wrong, and you know they I mean, they're not totally wrong. They bring up good points, but their baseline philosophy about, freedom of choice and free will and all this. Here's the thing. I think that McWhorter and Lowry, and I know they're smarter than this, and that's why I think they're kind of doing a show. There are nuances to everything. And, to go on another tangent, the way they pile on to Ibram Kendi is hyperbolic, but he's not totally wrong. And I have seen these two mean girls pile on about his dreadlocks and his awards. But Stamp from the beginning is brilliant. That's why he won a National Book Award. They are way dismissive of Kendi and some of this other. I will not go on board with everything Kendi writes, but there's nuance. Some of what he writes is correct, and
All
they're
right,
just
let's welcome Christian to the conversation. Christian, welcome. So jump right in.
Hello, everyone. I just decided to join because I wanted to compliment Ann. He's been like fantastic, and I've learned a lot. I took a brief class one time about just the history of Islam and the Middle East, and a lot of it maps on to what Ann was talking about. So he's very knowledgeable, and I just wanted to congratulate him because he's been very good. Um, about Afghanistan, I agree with us needing to leave. I agree with us pulling out, but I don't think we did it in a good way. I think it's been horrible and very poorly planned. But yeah, I just really decided to join to compliment Ann.
Oh, great. Thank you for that compliment. So, back to Stanley. Stanley, you were saying something about that Glenn Lowry and McWhorter, they're just wrong.
right. But that I think that might be a different conversation. I don't want to take time away from Anne. So
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, this is a request to Charles. Can you do another conversation? And it could be like the conversation between Bree and Glenn, because that gets to the question Stanley is talking about, the disagreements between
Exactly.
them and
I was
trying to
going to do that.
understand. Stanley, you have some valid points, but I can just tell you that if you were to talk to Glenn, he would find him very reasonable and to
no,
actually find a lot of merit in
I
what you're saying.
I'm not. Like I said, I'm a fan of Glenn. I just don't agree with him. I'm a fan of Thomas Sowell and Shelby Steele, but I do not agree with them. And gosh, this is another conversation. But I think the reason Lowry and et al. They didn't grow up in the Deep South, and
They grew up in
to me,
Chicago, and that explains some of this.
right. And I'm I went to an elite private school. Actually, I did first through 12 Catholic schools, and I got called the N word in high school so many times. And it was high school. People, kids are mean. However, these kids didn't learn the N word at school, they learned it from their parents.
And this was at an elite high school.
It was a Benedictine military school.
That's elite.
It was elite. And you know what? Um, you'll be happy to know that I scored 10th highest in the city. I was a Thomas
Yeah,
Sowell. So,
yeah,
I didn't, it wasn't affirmative action that got me into the school. I did it on my own. And, of course, I was
yeah.
raised by parents, but the bottom
So
line is my experience. And I'm not going to say, I didn't go to, Harvard, but, decent state school. And my experience, and I am inclined to be a John McWhorter because he's brilliant. However, some of the things he says, there's a lot of stuff, and some of it tends to be where you grew up. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and believe me, I've seen some racism, and my parents who are still alive, they grew up in Jim Crow, Georgia,
yes,
and
I
some of the
think
stories
there's a
they
couple of
have to
things that
tell.
Glenn would totally agree with you. One is that about black exceptionalism and success in the face of so many adversities. This is what Glenn would love to see. Every day in the news, they cover more black people succeeding despite all the people who do all this stuff to stop them from succeeding, because that's
Now,
inspirational.
yes, now that's where Glenn gets it right. You can't fucking let these idiots hold you back. And I think that the black community, a good portion of it, in America, yes, they use this sort of stuff as a crutch. Like I said, Glenn and John aren't totally wrong. I just think they might think a tad less vehement had they grown up in the South.
Yeah, I think that is what I just described as a big part of where Glenn's mentality comes from. For
Well,
example,
no,
Black
John
Americans
more
are
so.
much more successful. Well, okay, Black Americans are much more successful economically than people who live in Spain or Portugal. Why isn't that celebrated? I mean, this was achieved despite overwhelming negative odds.
Well, I'll tell you why it's not celebrated. Um, you know, if the average wealth of a, a Black American is 10 times, and I think that's the number, I could be wrong, but way exponentially lower than the average white family, that's successful, compared to everywhere else, but it's not successful in America. And I mean that context matters there.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think now I'm guessing Glenn might say to you or others would say. The US average is pushed up by a small number of successful ethnics, Russians, Jews, etc. If you take them out, the Caucasian numbers look a lot less impressive.
Well, that's now apply that same argument to the Black community. Oprah,
Yeah.
okay, it's the same prop up. It's the same. Apply that argument to the Black community. There are a few billionaires that prop up everyone else. That's not much of an argument.
You have a good point. You have a good point. But in general, there's this beating down of black exceptionalism and black accomplishment. And you see the same thing in the way Biden talks about the ANDSF. They lost in okay, wait, in May, June, July, August. Wait, May, June, July. In 3 months, they lost something like 10,000 dead in the
Mhm.
battlefield. And Biden was publicly berating them as not wanting to fight. I mean, it was incredibly insulting.
Well, I the same sarcasm that I would use on a Trump. Um, let's be real. Biden back in 1994, signed on to super predatorism. So, it's shades of evil. But um, I am torn, um, quite
Well, so
frankly.
again, I'm not talking about his policy. I'm talking about the way he spoke in public. So
No,
what he
but
could have
why
done is
does
he
that
could have come up
matter?
on TV and said, "Hey, I'm praying for you. I'm rooting for you. I pray for you every night. Every time your soldiers die, I feel suffering, and I recognize your losses." And then praise the units that are fighting well, but says, "Look, you got to do this on your own. I'm giving you this much help, and that's what I'm giving you. But I'm rooting for you." If he had just done that, they would have helped because they felt
But
Biden was their enemy.
Personality
know,
wise, I don't see much difference between Biden and Trump.
Trump didn't berate the ANSF like this, never anywhere near like this.
no, he chose Mexicans.
Yeah.
So,
So they both berate
it,
people, but they choose different people to berate.
This is what I don't like about how many Americans and people outside the U.S. behave. They imply that somehow like black people can't be successful, or Afghans can't be successful, or they'll never succeed, or it's always inevitable they'll fail. I don't know why they say this. Even if they think this, they can keep it to themselves,
it's
and they can at
called
least
the
try to
Enlightenment.
inspire and go ahead.
It's called the Enlightenment. Have you ever, in totally different subject, but there's a certain continuity, and I guess the popular term these days is there's a straight line from, say, a John Locke to Biden, literally a straight line. And I know that I'm really being hyperbolic here. Um, they will they will take care of themselves. Things will sort themselves out. Um, Biden, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. That's presumption. There's a through line from the Enlightenment through the American founding through line to today. There's a huge there there's a huge amount of dismissiveness that is baked into this country.
Yeah, so that you're correct on that, and that is what I understand ugly Americanism to be. This
Yeah,
attitude.
Graham
It
Greene.
is the principal cause of anti-Americanism. It's not what you do, but it's that you respect the potentiality of others and you feel inspired by their successes.
Yes,
That's enough. You don't have to do everything for them.
right. And in nation building, that's huge presumptions. That whole philosophy of nation building, like if we show you the right way, you'll do the right way. That's bullshit. And America has been doing it for quite some time.
So when you say nation building, that's a big word. I think that's just a word people say. It's not
Well,
something
no,
Americans do.
I was in the military, um, and I loved it. It was great. But presuming, let's just take Iraq. Let's take Afghanistan. Okay, you're really going to go into a country with a culture that is what, exponentially older than American culture, and you're going to tell them how to treat women, right,
Well, so
wrong, or
that
indifferent.
is so you're onto a good point, but so a lot of it's not just Americans. This was a unanimous UN mission with over 60
and
countries,
and
and a
it's
lot of them had this
and it's
attitude, right?
dominated by Western culture.
Yes,
Led by the
yes.
US.
Well, yes,
Yes,
but I
absolutely.
think you underestimate the extent of which other countries like Japan were involved. It was a massive global community thing, and generally these operations turn into chaos because there's no one in charge. Every country does its own thing. No one's coordinated.
Got it.
It's like what they do in Haiti. They've destroyed Haiti. You can say the U.S.
Oh,
destroyed Haiti, but it's the world as a whole that did it.
oh my goodness. Um, there's a show that I watch. most mornings. And one of the ladies on, well, the lady on there is Haitian. She's first generation American. And, she brings up constantly, well, Haiti has been a pariah ever since what, 1804 or whenever 1807 was a revolution, I think. Thomas Jefferson himself feared Haiti. So I'm not sure that I can disagree that Haiti isn't being punished for historical sin. Maybe I'm being hyperbolic. There's a good case for that, but can you really have 200 years of coincidence?
There are certain problems in Haiti, but I think the international community has made
Oh,
everything
there are
much
a ton
worse
of them.
because they've made it a welfare case. All these countries have come in and given it welfare for generations, and they've
Mhm.
destroyed all local economy because how can
And
a farmer compete
resources.
when foreigners give it for free? They can never compete. So all the farmers go out of business, all the local businesses go out of business, and the place becomes destitute because they're
Right.
all fools. The foreigners who are in there are all fools who just want everyone to be dependent on them for everything.
Well, I'm not going to. I don't know enough about Haiti other than the revolutionary part. Um, which actually, I have a question for Charles and you. Um, when and this is an honest question. I do think that this is where Glenn Lowry and specifically and his mentor Stanley Crouch. Um, I think black people do whine a bit much. Sometimes we ought to just go screw it and move on. Um, and I kind of feel the same way about Haiti, but I'm totally unqualified. It's a feeling, not a fact. Um, there comes a point in time when you have to just do it, and this is what Charles and Lowry and I think sometimes you just have to do it. But damn it, for those of us who are less fortunate, um, it can be a hard road. And you're only a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And um, for the Oprahs of the world and the Obamas of the world, and even those of us that are kind of lucky, you cannot allow casual racism. Even if it's subtle, things like that grow like weeds. And I just think that there are a lot of things from nation building, which is just totally presumptuous. Um, you can't stop fighting, even if you're successful. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And I think that, Western Civ in general, but America in particular, we're willing to overlook way too much.
So
So
here's a question for you, Stanley, about this, because this relates to all the subjects we've discussed. There is a sense in the US that America is an exceptional country. Well,
it is
people
not.
know that the US used to have over half of global income. It now has 15%, and it's projected to have 8% within a generation. So why do people think that they don't have a lot to learn from foreigners and foreign countries?
Because we're stupid. And there's, to go back to Western Civ, there's hubris. And we were taught, hell, I was taught um, not a good version of history. America is exceptional, and there's some things we're really exceptional about. I think, you know, pop culture or music or, you know, even there's certain areas that we are exceptional, but
You're
you
exceptional in self-aggrandizement.
I'm not going to disagree with you. Um, there's a lot that Americans are dumb about, and mostly it's about ourselves.
Well, so here's one thing that I
we're
would
not
like to tell Americans. So in COVID-19, America did a bad job. So did Europe.
oh,
And so the
bad
US and
job.
Europe did a bad job in dealing with COVID-19. So then I would say, look at Nigeria. Nigeria did such a better job in dealing with COVID-19. So few casualties as related to population. Why can't we go to
Wait,
them and tell them to teach
I want
us?
to quibble with you on one thing. We did a bad job, or is that bad job ongoing?
Uh, okay, let's not get into that. I don't want to sidetrack the conversation. But Europe and
Got
the
it.
US has done a much worse job than Nigeria.
Okay, what is the common denominator between Europe proper and America?
We're
What
set
is
in our ways.
no,
We don't want to change.
no. It is, to quote Amy Wax, it is Western chauvinism. We think we're the best at everything, and you can't tell us any different.
I think there's also uh, just a presumption in favor of freedom, and
Yeah.
results be damned.
So you can't be smart and free?
Oh, you absolutely can. I'm just saying that America will, will rather not be
Here's
intervened.
my point. Um, has anyone here ever heard of a rock group called The Replacements? Well, there's a lyric in one of their songs that, if ignorance is bliss, stupidity is freedom. That's literally a line in a song. And that describes America sometimes. Ignorance is bliss, stupidity is freedom.
Yeah. And
I have
even
a
when
question.
Americans do learn from foreigners, we don't learn the right things. We learn the wrong things. We don't recognize what we do well and what we don't do well. There seems to be very little discernment, and it's very hard to understand why.
Because we're free.
Question for Ann. Like, to what degree do you think that the average Afghani person really bought into and is a part of and feels, the consent of the governed is a thing where they really believe in their government?
I think majority did. But remember, I mean, look at India. Look at what a successful democracy India is. And India and Afghanistan were one country in 1700, right? So is Pakistan. I think no, I think that is not the issue. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what happens. One of the problems is that the Afghan forces have been fighting this war all along, but some foreigners think that they're fighting this war. And so when the Afghans win things, they think it's because the foreigners think it's because of them. That's not really true. It's because of the Afghans. And you see that in Iraq. All these Americans think we won the Iraq war. It is the Iraqis who won the war. It's the Iraqi army that won the war. And then America helped on the side.
I
How
don't
I
can
don't
you
know
I,
why
judge?
people don't understand that.
How can
I
you
don't think
judge? And this is
America
just an open
thought they
question.
won anything.
How can you judge, like, to the degree to which people like actually participated in government? Because I think if you look at like the people who participated in elections, it's really low. So, like, to what
You
degree
mean
does
similar to
the
the
average?
US?
Sure, similar, but not entirely the same, right?
Well, I think it is
Because this
similar.
is
So you're saying it's 40 to
okay.
50% participate in elections. That's basically what happened in the US in the 80s about that.
Well,
Is it 40 to 50?
why
Like, do you know that? I thought it was something a lot lower.
No,
why
it's
are we
40 to
using
50%. Yeah,
America
Gotcha.
as a standard?
good point.
I'm not using that as a standard. I'm just saying I
Well,
just don't know to the degree. This is
I don't
kind of a
mean to
puppet government. They're backed by
I
the
don't
U.S.
Well, so you're using the word backed by the US, but they wouldn't see it that way. They're backed by many countries, not just the US. They were backed by Russia, by Iran, by China, by India, by Japan, by the Europeans. This is an American obsession to think everything is America. I don't know where that comes from.
It's the
and they
Coca-Cola you can buy in Iraq. That's a joke.
yeah. But there's this idea Americans make everything about America for no reason, and I don't understand it. Actually, people outside the U.S. don't understand it either.
Yeah, we
Well,
don't understand it.
Look, they wouldn't have seen it that way. They would have seen it through their own local prism. This is a war between them and the Pakistani army, and then some of them would have said, "Look, we need to make a deal. We can't fight these guys forever," because they all know has a 5 minute attention span. It's not going to help them in the long run. So they were trying to make a peace deal with the Pakistanis and give them things, and they all were willing to give up part of the democracy, basically give them a big share of power in their own country, even though their own people didn't want that. They're willing to give up a lot.
may I ask you a question? There was a statement made, who knows how long ago, um, about democracy, and I understand India is the biggest democracy, but and I want to think about how I ask this. Um, is I've never lived anywhere else outside of the country for more than a couple of weeks, I guess. Um, is democracy really compatible with other cultures? And I hope
Yes,
that doesn't
but
sound
I
dumb.
think no, I think it is. But remember, democracy is not the most important thing. The most important thing is freedom and pluralism and multiplicity and
Okay.
diversity. And so the U.S. is generally has been good in the past, not perfectly, but I would say India is better at that. There are more diverse countries than the U.S. out there. But 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 in but I think the U.S. has gotten worse at it recently
Well,
than it used to be.
and I've never been to India, but what about the caste system? How,
So
I mean, my impression, and again, I've never been there, but that can limit freedom a tad.
are you there?
I am.
Yeah. So I'll have to go for in a few minutes. But when you say this word, I think what you're talking about is tribes because India has 25,000 castes.
Right.
So it's more like tribes, and people keep track of their tribes and stuff. But
So
tribalism,
Isabel Wilkerson was wrong.
meaning what?
Isabel Wilkerson. She wrote a book called Caste, which came out in the last year or two, comparing American racism. I can't describe it well, but
Okay.
she basically likened American racism to the Indian caste system, and I
Yeah, so
suspect.
it's complicated. It's much more
Right.
complicated. But here's a question: do you think that the current prime minister of India is like Barack Obama? Because
No,
he technically comes from the well, he says he comes from well, see the thing I don't want to say it, but if you want to use this caste system word from one of the lower ones or one of the lowest ones, some would say, but I would not say that because he's the
Modi,
prime minister of the
right?
country. Yes.
Huh.
So then do you think he's authentic or real?
I really couldn't say.
I
I
think he's the
know.
most popular prime minister India's had in decades. So I don't think that's quite it's not as simple as people from the outside would say. Though there are how many castes would you say that the Muslims have or the Christians have? There are many different sects, right? So you could
Um,
call them all castes
mhm. um,
if you want. But just because
I
they're
would
different sects
argue
doesn't mean they
not
don't get along.
25,000, but there are. I agree with you. I think what you're saying is, Christians, and there's a whole lot of hypocrisy going around. Um, Christians have a ton of castes. Hello?
Hello. Yeah. So guys, I think this would be a good place to end this conversation because it's late at night. I have to go to bed, and I guess Anan wants to leave as well. But great conversation as usual.
Hey, Ann,
Christian.
um, are you sure you have my email address? I'd like to talk to you more.
Anan, if he doesn't have it, I'll supply it to him. So don't
Okay.
worry about that. Yeah. So thank you guys for coming to the conversation today. Christian, thank you for lending your voice. Stanley, thank you. Anan, thank you as usual. So till next time. Anan is still talking. Is he still talking?
Go ahead, Anna.
Anyhow, guys, I'll catch you in another live stream very soon.
Okay. Thank you, Charles.
It's good talking to you. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye.